Ali Velshi in for Lauren starts right now. Hey, Ali.
It's all in the reading. I read that article in the Wall Street Journal that you started your show with last night. It was a really good article. You're right. I'm glad you pointed out it was well reported. It wasn't one source. It was a lot of people. But the way you told that story at the beginning of your show was pretty remarkable. The Kristi Noem stuff, the Corey Lewandowski gun and the blanket left on the plane. There's a whole lot to unpack there.
There's so much. As is true for both of us, we also get to work with super smart, incredible producers who are funny and remember anecdotes and details and moments.
That's what makes the story.
That's what makes the story. But lots to say about Kristi Noem. No doubt about it.
But thanks for reminding me. Good shout out to the people who put these shows together for us because we get all the credit for it out there. And there's some hardworking people who find these things and weave these narratives that are really, really important to us and our viewers.
No doubt about it.
Team.
Thank you. Have a great show.
Okay. In 11 days, Donald Trump will give the first official State of the Union address of his second term. But if the polls are any indication, the American public's already told the president what they think about the state of our union. And it's a vision that's going to leave Donald Trump humiliated. According to multiple polls out this week, Americans are saying Joe Biden was a better leader than Donald Trump. The most humiliating of these polls for Donald Trump comes from his favorite polling group, Rasmussen, which is considered the most friendly to Republicans. Its polling director said, quote, if an election were held today between Trump and Biden, Biden would win. The polling comes 389 days after Donald Trump stood up in front of Joe Biden on Inauguration Day and said, quote, from this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end, end quote. Sit with that for a second. He was talking about a presidency that wasn't his when he used all those words. But ever since then, Donald Trump's done the opposite of what he said 389 days ago. We're less than 2 hours away from the third government shutdown of Donald Trump's second term. This one's a partial shutdown, but it's a big department, the Department of Homeland Security. Funding is set to expire at midnight as Democrats push back on Donald Trump's vicious, deadly immigration policies. And 2.5 months later from Trump's operation in Minnesota that saw 2 American citizens who were no threat to anyone at all, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, killed by federal agents, the Trump administration says it's pulling immigration agents out of Minnesota. The decision was no doubt hastened by what you're looking at in front of you. Everyday Americans taking to the streets in the bitter cold, coast to coast, and saying, damn it, we have had enough of this. We've had enough of this. Many local citizens and officials in Minneapolis say they're waiting to see just how thorough this withdrawal actually is. The New York Times reports, quote, the Trump administration's pullback of federal immigration agents from Minneapolis was a political retreat that showed that there are limits to what Americans will accept as the president pursues his deportation agenda. The withdrawal came on the eve of a funding shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, with a drumbeat of polls showing public opposition to President Trump's immigration tactics that rose after the fatal shootings of 2 protesters by federal agents last month. As Republican lawmakers increasingly worry about their midterm prospects, a few began to offer critical statements on the issue. We now know that 2 ICE officers involved in a non-fatal shooting of a Venezuelan man in Minneapolis are now under investigation for lying. MS Now reports, quote, federal prosecutors are investigating whether 2 Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers lied under oath about the shooting of a migrant in Minneapolis last month, an ICE spokesperson said. The about-face on the case, which Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem initially called an attempted murder of federal law enforcement, marks the latest instance in which immigration authorities have had to walk back such claims in the face of evidence contradicting them. On Thursday, prosecutors moved to dismiss the case, and on Friday, Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin told MS Now that a joint review of video evidence by ICE and the Justice Department has revealed that sworn testimony provided by 2 separate officers appears to include untruthful statements regarding the shooting. Both officers are now on administrative leave. Today, my old friend and colleague Don Lemon entered a not guilty plea in federal court in Minnesota 2 weeks after he was charged with 2 crimes while covering a protest inside a church in the wake of these Minneapolis shootings by federal agents.
People are finally realizing what this administration is all about. The process is the punishment with them. And like all of you here in Minnesota, the great people of Minnesota, I will not be intimidated. I will not back down. I will fight these baseless charges, and I will not be silent.
While the Trump administration doesn't seem to have an appetite for any consequences from the new trove of Epstein files, some people are facing some real-world consequences. This woman, Goldman Sachs top lawyer Catherine Rumler, announced that she will resign after her emails with Jeffrey Epstein were made public. The talent agent, Casey Wasserman, has lost some of his most high-profile clients, including two-time Olympic gold medalist soccer star Abby Wambach, over his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. Yesterday, the former Prime Minister of Norway was charged with gross corruption for his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. There are a bunch of others, none of whom have been charged with crimes related to sexual abuse or sexual assault. But this accountability is not extended to members of Donald Trump's inner circle connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Today, the Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke at the Munich Security Conference, where she said this.
I think what we are seeking is a return to a rules-based order that eliminates the hypocrisies around when too often in the West we look the other way for inconvenient populations to act out these paradoxes, whether it is, kidnapping a foreign head of state, whether it is threatening our allies to colonize Greenland, whether it is looking the other way in a genocide. Hypocrisies are vulnerabilities, and they threaten democracies globally. And so I think many of us are here to say, we are here and we are ready for the next chapter.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Robert Reich, who served as Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. He's a professor of public policy at UC Berkeley and the co-founder of Inequality Media. Professor, good to see you. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good to see you, Emily.
Where to start? There's Munich, where the French have said it's time to be independent of the United States. There's America, where, as we see, the fallout from Epstein is not the same. There's an economy that is, if you look at the top, let's start with that, because you study this stuff. If you look at the top line numbers of the economy, they're okay. They're not bad. Unemployment's pretty low. We had pretty good job creation numbers. Inflation looks like we're getting it under control. But this economy is wildly unfair and unequal.
And it's getting worse. Remember, Donald Trump was elected in part because he said he'd bring prices down.
Yep.
And you had particularly young men in America voting for Donald Trump. They felt that they wanted somebody who was on their side economically and politically. Well, what did we just learn? A new poll of young men shows that most of them feel like they've got a bad deal economically under Donald Trump. Many Americans, in fact, the polls are showing most Americans feel that they were better off a year ago, before Donald Trump came to town. This is a major turnaround, Ali. This is something that portends for the Republicans a very bad midterm election if Donald Trump permits there to be midterm elections. I mean, this is the man who staged a coup against the United States in 2020. So I can't predict what he's going to do.
Well, he said, the party in power always loses seats in the midterm election for no good reason. So why even have the midterm election, which is you can write off as Donald Trump nonsense, except there's the SAVE Act, which is not boilerplate Republican voter suppression. This is a whole new level of things. You and me equally could be asked to provide proof of citizenship to vote. This is not a pass please country.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope and expect that this will be something that does not get through the Senate. You can't get 60 votes for this in the Senate. And therefore, Donald Trump is not going to be able to get this actually enacted. But it is an indication of the kind of lengths to which he and his Republican lapdogs are going to go to try to, if not stop the election, at least make sure that the Republicans stay in power. I don't think they're going to succeed, but it's something that we all have to worry about and harden our election processes.
I want to talk to you about these 6 members of Congress who went out and made a video that is as obvious as the hair that's not on my head. I mean, they made a video telling people in the intelligence and military community that you are not meant to follow rules that you know to be illegal. That's a fact. Everybody who's in the military and the intelligence community knows that. Donald Trump said that they should be punished perhaps by hanging. They continue to go after these 6 people. A grand jury, by the way, failed to indict. They said this isn't even worth a trial.
I think that's very impressive and important, Ali. Grand juries, I mean, people in this country don't pay a great deal of attention to grand juries because they think, well, maybe grand juries are something like juries in criminal trials. They aren't. Grand juries are under the control of prosecutors, federal prosecutors. So in this instance, Jeanine Pirro, who was the U.S. attorney, she went to the grand jury and she laid out the evidence. There's nobody in a grand jury providing the contrary evidence. There's nobody there in any way saying you should not do this.
That's why they often say a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, because there's nobody on the ham sandwich's side in front of a grand jury.
99% of grand juries always do what the prosecutors want. But now we're beginning to see citizens. I mean, this is analogous to the citizens of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. They are saying no. They're standing up. They are feeling their responsibility as citizens to say no to this tyranny, this administration that doesn't really believe in democracy or the Constitution. These are average people in these grand juries, just like they're average people in Minnesota that are standing up and they're saying no.
Bob, what do you think about in the midterm elections? There's a good path to success for Democrats in the House. There's a narrower path to success for Democrats in the Senate, but it exists. When you look at some of these interesting candidates like Roy Cooper in North Carolina or Alexander Vindman in Florida, they're careful, regardless of what they're talking about this administration, what they're saying about this administration, to land on the fact that this is still a population that is affected by the economy and by the unfairness in this economy, by the rising cost of healthcare, by the rising costs of goods. How do Democrats approach this midterm election? We're worried about tyranny and authoritarianism and dictatorship, but people come out to vote on kitchen table issues.
I think that's exactly right. I'm not sure that there is a contradiction there. I mean, they vote on kitchen table issues because they are scared, they're insecure, they don't know exactly where their next paycheck is going to come from. Most Americans really are facing an economy that in many ways, Ali, is a much, much worse economy than they faced in many, many years. And that economy has the backdrop of being run by, or at least presided over by, an administration that is not responsive to the people, that is not doing what people want, that is putting up tariffs, making everything more expensive. So I think it's a false dichotomy. I think most people are going to want to vote on the economy, but the economy is a problem for them, partly because they feel so powerless in this kind of dictatorship we're in.
That is a good way to look at it. Thank you, my friend. Robert Reich is a former Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. He's a professor of public policy at UC Berkeley, and he's the co-founder of Inequality Media. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Ellie.
All right, coming up, Donald Trump's never-ending quest for retribution faced a lot of roadblocks this week, a lot of them, because the American people are pushing back, and the courts are pushing back, and members of Congress are pushing back and winning.